Our first speaker will be Professor Flàvio Cunha. Flàvio is an associate professor of economics at Rice University. He received his PhD from the University of Chicago in 2007 and taught for a number of years at the University of Pennsylvania. His research studies inequality, labor economics, and human capital with special attention to the effects of investments in children. He has also done some of his research with Nobel laureate James Heckman. Flàvio, thank you.
My recent research has really been on trying to understand why certain parents invest so little in their kids. And it's an issue that we have known for a long time. I like to show to people this research by Hart and Risley. It's amazing amount of research. What they did was from the time that the kids were about 10 months old, they sent a research assistant to the homes with a tape recorder, and the research assistant was supposed to follow kids around to record the quality of the language environment that they experienced. And what you see here are the average number of words addressed to the child in a period of 1 hour, okay, by families that have different socioeconomic backgrounds. So the high SES families start the children at 10 months old here on average 1,500 words per hour. You may think that this is a lot, but I'm actually speaking at a rate of 300 words per minute, okay? So 1,500 words per hour is not extreme amount of talking. And it goes up, continues to go up. It reaches almost 2,500 words per hour. And part of it is because children start responding and they start initiating more conversations. On the other hand, the welfare children, the children from welfare parents actually start, they fluctuate around 750 words per hour. And part of the reason it stays at that level is because they are encouraged never to talk. So if they start a conversation, the parents say, answer with a simple yes or no. Or if the parent starts a conversation, it's usually a conversation in which it's something like this: be quiet, shut up. So it's a fascinating reading. And what's really interesting is if you look at inequality opening up early on in life, it's really hard to show this with most instruments to measure child abilities, because it's really hard to measure child IQ when the children cannot express or have a very limited set of behaviors that are easy to measure. But what's interesting about their data is that they actually assembled a list of different words children had heard at every point in time. And what is sad to see is that at age 36 months, the welfare children knew about as many words as the the high SES children knew when they were 24 months old. So even at that young age, we're already seeing a 1-year developmental delay. So this is really, really large. Unfortunately, the inequality, so for me, as an economist, I would measure this as parental investment in language development in children, and I would measure, and for me this is a measure of the children's human capital. Now, we don't have a lot of studies looking at what's going on in terms of words addressed by children, partly because it took Hart and Risley over 10 years to actually compile all the data that they actually assembled. Nowadays, you can do this very easily with technology. So you just input a mini recorder in a child's clothing, and then you record the entire day of the child's language environment. But what we do know is data from other sources. So parental time use, this is based on parent diaries, and maybe I should ask Remy here to come and present the paper. And what we see is that inequality in investments across socioeconomic groups is actually increasing over time. Here you see around 1995, there is this, up to 1995, the amount of time parents spend on childcare activities or educational attainment across different educational attainment groups were pretty much tracking each other. Then suddenly in 1995, there's this sharp change in the gradients. a lot of this is actually explained by families that have at most children who are at most 5 years old. And it's not only time. You can look at you can look at expenditure as well. So this is here in the horizontal axis. What we are plotting is the income decile of the families. Number 1 are the poorest families. Number 10 are the richest families. And the different curves are curves at different points in time. So the first curve here, this one, actually shows the investments in the period between 1972 and 1973. There were differences, but not as large. More recent data is showing that the inequality in investments is really becoming a factor of 5 or 6 times larger between the richest and poorest families. And this is not because of increased inequality only. It's also because of increased amount of resources that are being devoted to higher income children. And as a consequence of that, what we've seen is that there's a growing increase in the stocks of human capital as well. So this is work by Sean Reardon, and what he did was to compile how test scores across different socioeconomic groups evolved over time for different cohorts, starting from as early as the Project Talent data, which had people from the 1940s, up to more recent data, for example, the ECLSK that had children born around the 2000. And again, what you see is 2 very interesting patterns. I don't know if I can have, should I have, okay, so, do I have, no. So, what you see here is, this is race, the relationship, differences in stocks of cognitives on test scores on human capital in terms of race, and it has been declining over time, meaning that African Americans have actually moved towards closing the gap. But when you look at across socioeconomic group, what you see is that this increase in inequality has actually become quite important. And the reason why this matters is because a lot of the inequality that we see in the labor market is actually determined by the inequality that is already present before people arrive in the labor market. So Jim Heckman and I just published a paper showing that there is this increase in inequality in labor market, both for college workers as well as for high school workers. But what is interesting is 40% of the increase in inequality of the for college workers is due to the increase in inequality of stocks of human capital before they actually made it to college. So around age 18, 19. It's a smaller number for high school graduates. What part of my research these days is a lot of the importance of early investments. A lot of the early investments that are really important for child development are things that do not cost a lot of money. So one of them is, for example, the quality of parental interaction with children. It's the quality of the words that parents spend with, the quality of words parents address to children, and the type of conversations that they have with their children. It doesn't cost a lot of money. So thinking of using the typical tools that economists would use is quite difficult to explain them. And yet, what I've been trying to do is to say, do these parents know the importance of, do all parents know the importance of engaging in early activities with their children? And we frame this through using a word that for this crowd might be a little bit strange. It's parental beliefs about the importance of doing this. Instead of using the word beliefs today, let me use the word expectations, because it's really the expectations about investing in kids. Should they know that putting in effort early on will actually generate some output later on? And the first problem is that I wanted to address is, can we even measure this parental expectations? Is it meaningful to do so? I think that I've made some progress, and I'm almost convincing myself that I think we can measure parental expectations. It's part of a long survey. It takes about 45, 50 minutes to answer these questions, because it's really hard for the parent to give in one answer exactly the answer we are looking for. So you have to go about this in different ways. And if we can measure parental expectations, then the natural question is, so we have what parents expect these returns should be, and we have the returns that we actually compute in the data. What is the relationship between the two of them? And unfortunately, I think that for a large set of low socioeconomic parents, for the majority of them, they really believe that their expectations about the returns are much lower than the returns we compute in the data. Is there heterogeneity in parental expectations? That's another question that I've been trying to answer. And yes, there is huge heterogeneity in expectations. And it's really interesting is the heterogeneity in parental expectations is much larger among the parents that come from low socioeconomic backgrounds and than in parents with high socioeconomic backgrounds. So the high SES parents have high expectations and very little heterogeneity around that value. Low socioeconomic parents tend to have very low expectations, but then a wide discrepancy in their expectations. And if there is heterogeneity in expectations, does it predict heterogeneity in investments? This is where my research is actually going on right now. We're collecting data, following up on parents that responded the first set of questions. By the way, parental expectations are measured when the parents are pregnant with the first child. So this is the first child that they have. They're in the second trimester of the first pregnancy. And we ask them a series of hypothetical questions about, suppose you do this to your child, what do you think your child is going to look like a few years from now? Okay? And it seems to be the case that heterogeneity in expectations hugely predict heterogeneity in investments. The final question that I'm trying to now organize studies around is it the case that we can change parental investments by affecting parental expectations? You may have correlation. The fact that heterogeneity in expectations predicts heterogeneity in investment doesn't necessarily mean that it's a causal effect. It can be, there can be many things that both lead parents to have high expectations and invest a lot in their kids. So right now, this is where I want this agenda to pursue. So you would think, if for my fellow economists, I never present what I'm going to present today, partly because I want to seem smart, but these are so basic questions that surely have been answered in other, have been asked in other social sciences, and it's true, it has. So there is a huge work in psychology in this literature, and it goes back for at least a period of 50 years. You can go back to work done by Hunt and Vygotsky. Vygotsky nowadays is really appreciated in psychologists, in some psychologist circles. He's created a theory of how children develop certain types of, certain dimensions of human capital that people like to call executive functions, which are how we plan things ahead and so on and so forth. So in the next few years, you're going to see a lot of preschools offering curricula that are called tools of the mind. This is Vygotsky. But you can go back to these guys and they would say, an important reason why we would like to have really very good preschool is because certain parents may not understand the importance of investing in kids early on. They literally state that as in their papers. And I mentioned, and there is, by the way, there is huge work in psychology trying to confirm whether this is true or not. I'm not going to cite the work. I'm more than glad to talk to people and explain exactly what they are doing. I think that for the talk today, I want to single out one paper. It's almost unfair that I'm doing this, but Meredith Rowe at the University of Maryland recently replicated Hart and Risley results. And Hart and Risley had a lot of data, but they didn't try to understand what was going on. They had several candidate explanations. And after she collected all the data, she went back and interviewed parents, and she showed to low socioeconomic parents the scores in number of words addressed to children, and the ones from the high socioeconomic status parents as well. And the low socioeconomic parents were really shocked to see the differences. And when she explained to them, she asked to them, why are you not talking to your child more? And the typical answer was, the great majority of answers were, I don't know that this is important to do so. I always thought that this was not something that we shouldn't be doing. So you're going to, now in the next few years, you're going to see a lot of interventions that are aimed towards trying to increase the amount of parental conversation with children, even though children are now going to, even though these interventions are going to affect parents that have really young children, like 6 months old, 7 months old children, okay? Now, I think that the most fascinating studies are the ones from anthropology. I accidentally found these studies. And this is really something about how it says a lot about how parental expectations shape exactly what parents do. So the anthropologists, the particular anthropologist I read, I could believe, I could imagine that they actually spent some time at the University of Chicago, because they really had this idea that parents are fully rational, they understand, they really love their children, they want their children to succeed, they understand the environment in which their children are going to grow, and they want to maximize the chances of success for their children. And they started observing parental-children relations because they thought that this would be very informative about cultural transmission within these within such certain groups. So I'm going to so this is a huge literature. I'm going to single out 3 studies. Well, not 3 studies, but 3 groups of people that were studied by some anthropologists, because I think that they are quite interesting in the contrasts that they provide. So one of them is the Kungsan in the Kalahari Desert in Botswana and Namibia, and then the Ache in Paraguay, who live actually not very far away from where I grew up. If I took a car, it would take me about a day to arrive at where they actually are. But they live in very different circumstances. The Kungsan, they are highly mobile. They settle in a location for a few days. They explore what they can from that region, and then they move within 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, but a very short period of time. The Ache in Paraguay live in an area in South America where for some periods there's a lot of rain. And if you're thinking the rainforest, that's not the region that I want you to think. But it floods, and so they're really limited in the area that they can occupy. So for certain periods of time, they're going to be living in regions where it's dense forest, it's not a lot of chance for mobility, and you don't want to move around because you may end up finding a jaguar who is really hungry and might want to eat you for dinner. And what is really fascinating is that both groups really believe that motor development must be taught to children in a very, very disciplined way. And the Kalahari and the Kungsan tribe people do that in ways that would be almost unimaginable for most Western parents, to the point that a 2-year-old can very comfortably manage, for example, a knife that would cut even me, someone like me. Given my very limited motor skills. And they are able to walk at a very early age and run at a very early age. And the reason why the Kungsan do that is because they need the children to be able to be mobile. And they need them to be very dexterous in using these types of instruments. The Ache in Paraguay, on the other hand, the last thing that they want is for the child to be walking around the forest because, again, of the jaguar and the snakes. So what they do is, instead of teaching the child, making these exercises with the child, they actually make sure that the child is always in a horizontal position. So it takes them a long time for them to learn how to walk, for them to learn how to run, because the parents don't want them walking around the forest. They want to protect the children from surviving these dangers. So even though both groups have exactly the same expectations about how someone is supposed to learn motor skills, they behave in completely different ways because of the environment where they are. And I think that in a society where we live right now, in which there's so much specialization, I think it's interesting to mention the Guzi from Kenya, which until the 1960s and 1970s really lived in semi-autarkical households. They actually engaged in very little trade with outside people from outside their household. And as a result of that, they had very little specialization and everyone had to work. And children were seen as a source of labor. And here's the interesting thing. They believe that if you talk to your child, you actually make the child disobedient. So for years, they actually do not address the child at all. So they make the child by themselves. They have to play by themselves. They cannot interact with adults, so that they actually they immediately follow an order when an adult tells them, you have to do this. So there is a lot of work in sociology as well. Goes back to even the 1920s, even more older than psychology and anthropology. And we are now seeing a resurgence of this literature through the work by Annette Larios, in which she looks at low socioeconomic parents doing natural accomplishment of growth, in which they're not talking a lot to the children, but they are trying to form these non-cognitive skills in which children follow rules very rapidly, versus concerted cultivation, which is they're preparing children, as the high SES parents are preparing children to do well in school, in colleges, and so on and so forth. So there is work I hope that Anna Azer is going to talk about, in which it's fascinating. I've told her that it's not news for her, but it's really the situation in which new information might affect parental expectation. And I think that Anna has documented very clearly how parental information about the effects of smoking while pregnant has changed parental smoking during pregnancy for high socioeconomic groups much faster than it did for low socioeconomic groups. So what is it that we know from the research I'm doing so far? So I want you to think of elasticities if you're not an economist, and by elasticity I mean if I increase investment, if I say that elasticity is 10%, I mean by that is that if I increase investments by 100%, human capital is going to be 10% higher. So in previous work with Jim and Suzanne, what we found was that this elasticity of investment with respect to, of human capital with respect to investment is 35%. There's other work that suggests that this is even higher. In this joint work that I'm doing with Irma Ella and Jennifer Culhane, in which we are measuring these expectations, unfortunately, we're finding that for the low socioeconomic groups, the median mom, across different ways of measuring these beliefs, is somewhere between 4% and 19%. Okay, so if I take my number as the lower bound of the elasticity, and I take 19% as the upper bound across the median moms in the low socioeconomic groups, a simple simulation of an economic model would indicate that you could increase investments by almost 30% if you were able to move parental beliefs. And I thought, I solved the problem of poverty, and it turned out that I did not. It is really hard to change people's beliefs. There are some programs. I'm not going to talk much about them. Some of them were very, very successful, but I'm going to tell you that there are about 100 programs that try to change parental beliefs. Most of them fail tremendously, except for maybe 4 or 5. One is a home visitation program in Jamaica, in which they provided cognitive stimulation to children. And it was a small-scale program, had huge consequences for human capital formation for the lifetime of children. It's now being replicated in Colombia. There's one that is the Nurse-Family Partnership, and it's a much more restricted program, in which what it really tries to do is to tell parents about the importance of prenatal investments in the health, having a healthy pregnancy, and then having investments in the health of children in the first 2 years of the child's life. And it has huge consequences for reducing maltreatment and child abuse, with really important reductions in Medicaid costs associated with the child showing up in our ER rooms. Programs a lot of the programs are intended to affect parental behavior about the importance of teaching basic things to children. And there is some evidence that 2 of them actually work, but there is evidence that 90% of them actually don't work. And the last one is in some developing countries, the issue of nutrition is really still a major one. And all that we know is that there is a program in Malawi that has been able to make some progress. And part of it is by actually engaging fathers as well. The fathers become they realize the importance of basic nutrition for the physical development of children, that they actually start working more to get higher income so they can actually afford more foods to their, more and better food to the children. Let me just conclude. And so we study this and we tend to frame this as an inequality issue, but it's a much broader issue. So as economists, we know that long-run economic growth is because of technological improvement. Technological improvement requires human capital, and I think that the family is really a very important institution in which human capital is produced. So if we can come up with programs that help families produce human capital of children, it's not only that we're making progress towards reducing inequality, we are also making progress towards increasing long-run economic growth. So thank you.